Hello there. There are some people born in this world with a sensitized nervous system. Some of them are naturally more intuitive than others. They feel others' emotions vividly but silently. These really are their stories. We have Eve, who wants to forgive the past and move on with trust. Okay, and Eve is a life code 9. So we have 3 people involved. We also have her ex-husband, who's a life code 110. I think we're going to put him here. It's a 110 here. And we have her ex-partner, who is a life code 9. Yep, life code 9. Okay, so we have 2 life code 9s, and we have 1 life code 110. So we'll have a look in a moment as to why I've put the ex-husband dressed as Superman.
Welcome to the Sensitive Mind Show.
Your purpose in life as a sensitive is to experience the deeper parts of the mind, to move beyond fear and to manage your energy, no matter the circumstance. I'm going to show you, as a sensitive, how you can maximize your talents and feel comfortable in your own skin. For show notes and to join the conversation, visit heidisawyer.com/mind. So what has Eve told us about her situation and what she wants me to have a look at? Okay, so there is a repeating pattern of betrayal in my love relationships in my life. My ex-husband betrayed me with his addiction to gambling. I couldn't trust him due to lies. Then I was in a relationship for 9 years with another partner that was broken by his addiction to alcohol. I lived with another guy and he betrayed me with multiple relationships with other women. I've been alone since that in 2009. I feel unable to trust men. So what's the problem the situation creates? I'm lonely, resentful of others who have a loving relationship and feelings of depression and anger. My parents died in 2011 and 2014, and due to things done by 3 of 4 sisters, I only trust one. Am I meant to be alone? I feel stuck and hurt emotionally. So what is the question that she would like me to answer for her? What is the purpose of these betrayals? How do I forgive and move forward, trust again? Am I meant to be alone to fulfill my life purpose? Okay, so Eve wants to understand the energy around this past pattern so that she can release it and move forward with confidence. Okay, so clearly what we have here, obviously we're going to have a look at in terms of the life codes, where we have addiction type scenarios going on here. Okay, so why Eve is attracting these kind of relationships and why they feel attracted to her. Okay, so we have the ex-husband here, and I've chosen this character dressed as Superman because we're looking at gambling addiction as far as he's concerned. And the thing is, generally with gambling addiction, people get caught in this cycle of feeling that somehow or another, at some point or another, they're going to turn into this superhero where everything then turns good and it's going to be fine and they don't need to mention it. They get secretive about it. They hide it because at some point or another, they're going to have this big break that's going to be fine and make everything fine and dandy. Why have we got the ex-partner as this life code 9, as this kind of rock-playing man-child? Because I suspect that what we're going to have in this situation is something come up where Eve is feeling that she's having to parent these kinds of characters. Okay, so the ex-partner had alcohol addiction and the ex-husband had a gambling scenario. So why is Eve around these scenarios? or has been around these scenarios, and where she's got into this situation now where she feels she can't trust herself as far as possible future relationships are concerned, even though she wants to be able to trust and wants to be able to go into one. So what do we have here? Well, as a life code 9, anyway, so we'll start with Eve as that life code 9. Life code 9s often get the blame for things because they reflect people's unconscious. They reflect aspects of the subconscious. So if you look in here, the 9 is represented by the moon. Things that are not highly effective, but not particularly tangible. We know that the moon cycles have a strong pull and a magnetic pull. Of course they do, because they can affect tides, or the moon does affect tides and things like that. But we don't really physically see the impact of the moon like we see the impact of the sun, as an example. So for life code 9s, often they find themselves on the receiving end of the undertone of something, what's going on underneath the undertone of these kind of situations. 110s, we are in a 110 year, so the 110 energy becomes very relevant for everybody this year moving forward. So what does that mean for Eve in terms of her life? So she's going to have recollections this year of looking at some of those things in her life as far as her ex-husband was concerned, and probably the secrecy around the gambling and all of that kind of thing, as to the reasons why and the blame. So quite often life code 9s take the feeling that they are either being blamed, or they take the blame for other people's actions and behaviours. They assume that it's their fault. And so when they get into assuming that it's their fault, that's when, exactly as Eve is describing, that they get defensive and rejecting. So they become kind of defensive around things and reject. So hence the situation where Eve is finding herself automatically rejecting and being very honest in what she's saying here, but she now feels lonely and resentful of other people with good relationships. Now that's brave. That's really brave, because she's admitting that she's feeling powerless as far as these scenarios are concerned, which suggests very strongly that she's an aware 9, because normally people wouldn't necessarily do that as the ex-partner, okay? Because clearly, with most addictions, not all the time, but certainly in my experience of interacting with people with addictive pasts or addictive presence and things like that, what is the addiction about? It's about keeping away from something that feels uncomfortable, something that feels painful, or some kind of inadequacy. So I would say the link between these figures, all of them, is a deep inadequacy, feeling of inadequacy. So for the 2 life code 9s, there would be a deep unconscious inadequacy, but in Eve's scenario, she's owning it, as we can see. She's owning it. So her addiction, so to speak, might be something along the lines of disruptive relationships, because if they're disruptive, she doesn't have to then feel the pressure of having to be present, or the really strong, which happens for a lot of people, fear that if you can truly love and trust someone, that they might leave you. Okay, so then it's safer to actually get involved with people on an unconscious level, especially as that life code 9, with people that you can guarantee are going to be untrustworthy. Hence the scenario what we have here with 2 people that she really very strongly felt that she couldn't trust. And then we have also, the ex, the most recent ex-partner, as far as the relationships are concerned. Okay, so we've got betrayal in all the different key areas. So then Eve's energy to solve is coming closer and closer, because now it's showing in actual relationships. Okay, so the question becomes, how can Eve, or what is it that Eve needs to reconcile within herself in order to be able to release the pain of these past relationships and begin the process of attracting wholesome interactions that she feels safe enough to stay around? So in order to answer that question, we're not really looking at the wounds necessarily of the ex-partners, but we'll have a look to see whether any of that is relevant. But we'll have a look primarily at the wound of Eve and her fear. There will be a strong fear deep within somewhere of being abandoned. So I know it sounds bizarre, but the safety then is to then attract relationships where you can guarantee that they're going to abandon you, so that you can never really truly be disappointed, because a part of you always kind of knew that something about them would be an abandoning scenario, even if it wasn't immediately obvious. And for a life code 9, even if it wasn't immediately obvious, obvious that there was alcohol, that there was gambling, Eve's unconscious, because she's ruled by the subconscious, will have known. Okay, would have known. So even if she couldn't quite put a finger on it at the time, a part of her will have known. So she would have then continued those scenarios, because at some deep level it would have been safe, because she never really fully had to be involved. Okay, so let's have a look to see what Eve's wound is that her unconscious is trying to heal, in order then to release herself from addictive relationships. Okay, so I'm thinking of Eve as far as that scenario is concerned, and let's see what we get. So using my big pile of archetypes, let's have a look and see what we get. Okay, so we have the Advocate. I would say that Eve has, at some point in her life, seen herself in a position of being the peacekeeper. I won't say maker and keeper. And we can also look at this in terms of, the question that she's asked, and also see that 3 of her 4 sisters she's also found to be scenarios that let her down. So that suggests to me that in her foundational experience there would have been clashes, difficulties as far as the family dynamics were concerned, and so she would have felt, so certainly she's at least one of 5, that maybe the pecking order was strong. Okay, so within that pecking order, at some level or another, she would have felt she either had to be the peacekeeper of other people's squabblings, or she would have to pacify in order to keep others happy. Hence the reason now, I suspect, is the reason why she feels resentful of others who have a loving situation. Okay, so let's see if I'm right, and we'll see whether maybe that issue was to do around communication. So we'll have a look as far as, I think we'll look at the ex-husband first as that life code 110, see whether I'm right around that. So I'm thinking of that, the essence of the whole picture, whilst I choose something to reflect that. Let's have a look. We have the monk stroke nun. So I would say, interestingly, that I'm right as far as the abandonment scenario is concerned. Why? Because why would I say that would be true of a monk or a nun? Because monks and nuns are the archetype of being alone. So they're the archetype of being alone, and in worship of an invisible force. So for the ex-husband, he would have been alone and in worship of an invisible force. For him, his invisible force was gambling. Okay, so he would have been completely emotionally unavailable. So for Eve, actually, the deep core of her would say that love is unavailable, I suspect. And this would be linked strongly with the unconscious of the 9 energy mixed with the 110 of the physical world. So I suspect that a strong part of Eve has never felt fully supported. Okay, never felt that at all. And this is highlighted by the ex-husband as far as that energy is concerned. So let's have a look as far as the ex-partner is concerned. Let's see it reflected in the 9 energy in Eve's own sphere of energy field. Let's have a look and see what we get. Okay, so thinking of the ex-partner. Hedonist. Okay, so everything would have been about him. Okay, everything would have been about him. Everything would have been about what he needed, what he wanted. So again, something else, so in his case the substance, became the relationship. So the real core issue for Eve to solve is the fact that she's felt, is to retrace in her life the time when she felt like the ultimate peacekeeper. And that, I strongly suspect, would take her back to early years. Observing a family dynamic, an argumentative family dynamic where she either had to be the peacekeeper, or had to act out things quietly because it wasn't, she felt uncomfortable with involving herself in that situation or in that dynamic. But her psyche would have then learnt that relationships are selfish. And her psyche would have then thought, well, relationships are selfish and I'm never put first. Therefore, her 9 vibration would say, okay, well, the safe relationships are the ones where they are distracted by something else. So the ex-husband, it was by his own aloneness and need for abandonment, and then therefore his worshipping became the gambling. And for the ex-partner, around his alcohol abuse, it was everything to do with what he wanted and couldn't see beyond that, in terms of maybe healing through a partnership. So how does Eve solve this? Well, in order for her to release her resentment and come into a place of trust, she actually needs to go back in her mind beyond these relationships, back to any foundational experiences. In my suggestion definitely is that life code 9, to just think about, and for a life code 9, again, this would be particularly easy, is to just think, okay, when was the first time that I observed a situation where I felt that I was having to be peacemaker, I could see this, or that it was the safest thing to do around that was not to get involved and was to emotionally withdraw. If she can then recall that scenario, quite often all it is, especially for a life code 9 in that 9 vibration, is the recollection of that, for that energy to just move on and release. I've seen that so many times, where just recognizing it gives it the power to just disperse itself, to then feel the reality underneath. And then Eve would do very well to then become her own peacemaker, to make the peace within herself, that actually the core of her has felt emotionally abandoned for most of her, I suspect, for most of her life, where people around her's interests have been everywhere else. So how does she solve that moving forward? She solves that moving forward by experimenting with this possibility of that, yes, there are kind people in this world, and that if a relationship doesn't feel kind to her, then to let it go, and to be unafraid to let it go. And then she might say, well, I wouldn't have any relationships in my life. Well, if you then can experience that own kindness towards yourself, you'd be amazed how much, or how attractive that is also to kind people. And then you start attracting back into your life. Okay, maybe initially quite slowly, but you then start attracting back into your life, or into your life even for the first time, relationships based on kindness. How can I say that? Because I know that as a life experience. So, what can we learn from that? Especially as a sensitive. As a sensitive, we can learn from this scenario that actually it's not always the people showing us a level of dysfunction, so in these ex-partnerships, that are the source of our angst. Sometimes it goes a level deeper and a level further back, and when we access that point, it can offer, and I say in my experience, you take what resonates, you put to one side what doesn't, it can offer a huge sense of relief, and the ability to move forward. So that's the end of this episode of the Sensitive Mind Show. If you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, do share it with your friends, and be sure to join me next week, where I'll be looking forward to giving you an alternative perspective on your relationship dilemma. Bye for now, and let me leave you with this. For more great free content designed to support your purchase of my book, Highly Intuitive People, 7 Right Brain Traits to Change the Lives of Intuitive Sensitive People, please visit finallyfeelunderstood.com. There you can subscribe and download for free the meditation specific to today's episode. If you have already read the book, then it's time for you to receive exclusive access and support from me and your fellow intuitive sensitives as we go deeper together along this proven 7-step path by joining us in my monthly membership program called Heidi's Circle. There you can ask me anything in a safe and private environment, and I will answer you live. Join us today by visiting healmyinnerworld.com.